This show turned a family of monsters into the happiest household on television. The real people behind them were anything but. One lost his childhood fortune to his own parents and wrote a law that protects child stars. One lied to coworkers about a diagnosis killing her. One lived through a tragedy the writers could never have invented. 62 years after the cameras stopped, this is where every one of them ended up. Number 1 is Jackie Coogan, who played Uncle Fester and whose own childhood tragedy wrote a law that still protects child stars today. He was already one of the most famous human beings on the planet 4 decades before he ever shaved his head for the role. He was 49 when the show premiered, born John Leslie Coogan in Los Angeles, California on October 26, 1914, the son of 2 vaudeville performers. At age 7, he starred opposite Charlie Chaplin in The Kid, one of the defining films of the silent era. His face was merchandised on everything from peanut butter jars to whistles before he was 10. Uncle Fester was a man who lit a bulb in his mouth for a living. Jackie Coogan had already been the most powerful child actor alive. Here's the part almost nobody remembers. Coogan's own childhood ended in catastrophe twice. In 1935, he was the sole survivor of a car accident that killed his father and 3 others. 3 years later, he discovered his mother and stepfather had spent nearly all of the roughly $4 million he'd earned as a child star, and he sued them for it, in a case so public that California passed the Child Actors Bill in 1939 to stop it from happening to any other kid, a law still known today as the Coogan Law. He served in the Army Air Force in Burma during World War II. He married 4 times. Betty Grable from 1937 to 1939, Flower Perry from 1941 to 1943, Anne McCormick from 1946 to 1951, and Dorothea Lamphere from 1952 until his death. His grandson, Keith Coogan, later became an actor too. Coogan died of a heart attack on March 1, 1984 in Santa Monica, California, at age 69, and is buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City. Uncle Fester spent the show hoarding light bulbs and dynamite in a house that loved him anyway. Jackie Coogan spent his real childhood being loved by an entire country and robbed by his own family, and turned that theft into the only law in America that still bears a child actor's name. Number 2 is Carolyn Jones, who played Morticia Addams and who was cartoonist Charles Addams' own personal choice for the role before a single audition was held. She was 34 when the show premiered, born Carolyn Sue Jones in Amarillo, Texas on April 28, 1930. She was naturally a strawberry blonde who dyed her hair black for 1957's The Bachelor Party and never changed it back. In 1958, she was nominated for an Academy Award for that same performance and won a Golden Globe for Most Promising Newcomer. Morticia was the calm at the center of the chaos, gliding through a house full of explosions without ever raising her voice. What few people know is that Jones spent her final 2 years managing a terminal cancer diagnosis while still working television roles. She married 4 times, briefly to Don Donaldson in 1950, then to a young producer named Aaron Spelling from 1953 to 1964, years before he became a television mogul, then to voice coach Herbert Green from 1968 to 1977. After the Addamses ended, she appeared in the landmark miniseries Roots and played Hippolyta, mother of Wonder Woman on the 1970s Wonder Woman series. She was diagnosed with colon cancer in March 1981 while filming the soap opera Capital, and continued playing scenes from a wheelchair in real pain, telling her colleagues she was being treated for ulcers. Knowing her time was short, she married her boyfriend of 5 years, Peter Bailey Britton, in September 1982. She died on August 3, 1983, in West Hollywood, California, at age 53, and was cremated. Her ashes placed in her mother's crypt at Melrose Abbey Memorial Park in Anaheim. Morticia never let the house rattle her. Carolyn Jones spent her final 2 years lying to her own colleagues so she could keep working, and only stopped when her body finally gave her no choice. Number 3 is Ted Cassidy, who played Lurch, and whose 2-word catchphrase, "You rang?" became one of the most imitated lines in American television, despite the fact that Lurch barely spoke at all. He was 32 when the show premiered, born Theodore Crawford Cassidy in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on July 31, 1932, and raised in Philippi, West Virginia, where he was already over 6 feet tall by age 11. Cassidy earned a degree in speech and drama from Stetson University, played college basketball, and worked as a radio announcer in Dallas, where he was part of the station's on-air coverage of President Kennedy's assassination in 1963, before moving to California within the year to chase acting instead. Lurch was a 7-foot shadow who communicated in grunts. Ted Cassidy had one of the most articulate radio voices in Texas. Here's what almost nobody knew about him. He married Margaret Helen Jesse in 1956. The marriage ended in divorce in 1975 and produced 2 sons, Sean and Cameron, both of whom grew up to become attorneys. Away from Lurch, his deep voice became a fixture of Saturday morning animation, Hanna-Barbera's 1979 Godzilla series, and the voice of the Incredible Hulk, plus the android Rook on the original Star Trek. In January 1979, doctors at St. Vincent Medical Center in Los Angeles performed open-heart surgery to remove a benign tumor from his heart. He died of complications from that surgery on January 16, 1979, at age 46. He was cremated, and his ashes were buried in the backyard of his Woodland Hills home. Lurch answered a bell for 2 seasons and never explained himself. Ted Cassidy spent his real life narrating a national tragedy and voicing some of animation's biggest names, and the same body that made him unforgettable is the one that took him at 46. Number 4 is Blossom Rock, who played Grandmama, and who had already spent 3 decades in Hollywood under 2 other names before most of America ever learned hers. She was 69 when the show premiered. Born Edith Marie Blossom McDonald in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on August 21, 1895, the older sister of movie star and singer Jeanette MacDonald. She began in vaudeville, billed as Marie Blake, appeared in over 100 films for MGM, mostly uncredited, and only returned to her birth name in the 1950s. Grandmama cackled over a cauldron and never seemed to age. Blossom Rock had already lived an entire Hollywood career before she got there. Most viewers never knew that Rock's real final decade was almost entirely silent. In December 1967, a year after the show ended, she suffered a stroke that took her speech and left her unable to reunite with her castmates for the 1977 special Halloween with the new Addams Family, though she reportedly watched it from her bed at the Motion Picture and Television Country House and Hospital, where she had moved permanently. She had married vaudeville partner Clarence Warren Rock in 1926. He died in 1960, and the couple never had children. She died on January 14, 1978, at age 82, and was interred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale. Grandmama's voice was half the joke, a rasping cackle that never stopped. Blossom Rock spent her last decade with no voice left at all, watching her own castmates reunite on a television screen from a hospital bed, unable to say a single word back. Before we get to the family's youngest members, a question for the comments. Of everything Charles Addams Family ever did on screen, Thing popping out of its box, Fester's light bulb, the tango with a rose in his teeth, which Addams Family moment has stayed with you the longest? Tell me below, I read every one. If you're enjoying the channel, please subscribe. The Addams Family cast is the kind that takes weeks to research properly. Court records, death certificates, hospital details, all of it gets verified before a single line gets written. Your subscription is what keeps that work possible. Number 5 is Margaret Hamilton, who played Hester Frump, Morticia's mother, in 3 episodes, and who audiences had already been terrified of for 25 years before she ever set foot on the Addams set. She was 61 when she first appeared on the show in 1965. Born Margaret Brainerd Hamilton in Cleveland, Ohio on December 9, 1902, and trained as a kindergarten teacher at Wheelock College before acting pulled her away entirely. By 1939, she had become the single most recognizable villain in American film as the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz. Hester Frump was a minor mother-in-law joke, in and out in 3 episodes. Margaret Hamilton had already given an entire generation of American children permanent nightmares. Here's the twist almost nobody knows. Producers originally wanted Hamilton for the role of Grandmama Addams, the far witchier of the show's 2 grandmothers. And she turned it down, taking the smaller part of Granny Frump instead, reportedly wearing the very same dress from her Wizard of Oz wardrobe 26 years later for the role. That earlier film had nearly ended her career for a darker reason. On December 23, 1938, filming the witch's fiery exit from Munchkinland, the trapdoor beneath her failed to drop in time, and she suffered 2nd-degree burns to her face and 3rd-degree burns to her hand. She recovered and returned to set with one condition: no more fireworks. She married Paul Meserve in 1931. The marriage ended in divorce in 1938 and produced 1 son. She served for years on the Beverly Hills Board of Education and became a public advocate for spaying and neutering pets, appearing in PSAs with her own cat. In failing health, she moved into a retirement community in Salisbury, Connecticut, and died there of a heart attack in her sleep on May 16, 1985, at age 82. The Wicked Witch of the West melted at the end of her own film. Margaret Hamilton did not. She outlasted the flames that nearly ended her career in 1938, outlasted the witch herself, and was still taking small character roles on television right up until the decade she died in. Number 6 is Ken Weatherwax, who played Pugsley Addams and who spent more of his life running from the role than the world ever realized. He was 8 when the show premiered, born Kenneth Patrick Weatherwax in Los Angeles, California on September 29, 1955. Into a family already inside the business, his aunt was actress Ruby Keeler, and his half-brother had played Porky on the original Lassie. Pugsley was the insect-eating older brother who got electrocuted for fun and asked for seconds. Ken Weatherwax played all 64 episodes without missing one. Here's the part the reruns never show. Weatherwax later said he was kicked out of 6 or 7 schools for the teasing that came with playing a boy named Pugsley, and enlisted in the army at 17 partly to escape it. He did return once, playing a taller, muscular Pugsley Sr. in the 1977 reunion special Halloween with the new Addams Family. Otherwise, typecasting kept steady acting work away, so he moved behind the camera, working as a grip and set builder around Hollywood, and stayed close for life with his TV sister Lisa Loring, appearing together at Addams Family fan events for decades. He died of a heart attack at his home in West Hills, California on December 7, 2014, at age 59, and was interred at Valhalla Memorial Park Cemetery in North Hollywood. Pugsley never once complained about the family that raised him. Ken Weatherwax spent years quietly resenting the name that made him famous, then spent the rest of his life showing up for the people who shared it with him anyway. Number 7 is Felix Silla, who played Cousin Itt, and whose entire performance was built on the fact that no audience member ever saw his actual face. He was 27 when Cousin Itt was introduced, partway through the show's run. Born Felix Anthony Silla in Recognizable, Italy, on January 11, 1937. He arrived in the United States in 1955, speaking no English at all, and joined the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, where he learned both the language and his trade as a bareback writer, trapeze artist, and tumbler. Cousin Itt communicated in an unintelligible mumble that only the Addamses understood. Felix Silla built an entire career being understood by everyone despite never showing his face. Almost nobody in the audience knew that the floor-length hairpiece covering him head to toe as Cousin Itt was made of real human hair, and that Silla went on to become one of Hollywood's most in-demand costumed performers, later playing a hang-gliding Ewok in Return of the Jedi and the robot Twiki in Buck Rogers in the 25th century. He married Sue Silla, also a little person, in 1965, and they stayed married until his death, raising 3 children, Bonnie, Michael, and Diana. His son Michael died at age 45, the year before his father. Silla died of pancreatic cancer in Las Vegas, Nevada, on April 16, 2021, at age 84. Cousin Itt never said a clear word and never needed to. Felix Silla spent 6 decades as one of the most recognizable performers in Hollywood, while showing his real face to almost no one, and outlived nearly the entire cast that hired him. Number 8 is Lisa Loring, who played Wednesday Addams at 6 years old, and whose adult life held more genuine horror in it than anything the character ever pretended to enjoy. She was born on Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands on February 16, 1958, to Navy parents who separated shortly after her birth, and she was modeling by age 3 after her mother moved them to Los Angeles, making her first TV appearance in a 1964 episode of Dr. Kildare months before landing the Addams role. Wednesday Addams raised spiders as pets and named her favorite headless doll after a beheaded queen. Lisa Loring played her without a trace of darkness, sweet, curious, almost gentle, the opposite of every Wednesday who came after her. Here's what happened once the cameras stopped rolling for good. In 1991, Loring discovered the body of her close friend, Kelly Van Dyke, after Van Dyke died by suicide. A discovery that sent Loring into a crisis severe enough that she attempted to take her own life shortly afterward. She entered rehab in 1992 and got clean. Between her Addams Family years and that crisis, she had kept working steadily. As the World Turns, The Girl from UNCLE, Fantasy Island, Barnaby Jones, before largely stepping back and returning to smaller stellar horror film roles in the 2010s. She is survived by two daughters, Vanessa and Marianne. On January 28, 2023, 4 days after suffering a massive stroke brought on by high blood pressure and smoking, her family made the decision to remove her from life support at Providence St. Joseph Medical Center in Burbank, California. She died at 64 with both of her daughters holding her hands, just as Netflix's Wednesday had introduced her signature dance, the Drew, to a new generation who had no idea she originated it. Wednesday Addams found death funny, harmless, a hobby. Lisa Loring found the real thing standing over a friend's body at 33 years old, survived what came after, and spent the rest of her life quietly proving she could still get back up. Number 9 is the last name on this list, and the only one still able to answer to it. John Astin played Gomez Addams, the cigar-chewing patriarch rapturously in love with his own wife, and is today the last surviving member of the original cast. He was 34 when the show premiered, born John Allen Astin in Baltimore, Maryland on March 30, 1930, and had already studied mathematics at Johns Hopkins University before theater pulled him away entirely, landing him a small role in West Side Story in 1961, 3 years before Gomez. Gomez kissed his way up Morticia's arm every time she spoke French and blew up model trains for fun. John Astin played him as a man helplessly, permanently happy, and never once let the joke turn cruel.
What the credits never mentioned is that the warmth Astin brought to Gomez followed him through one of the more unusual families in Hollywood. He married 3 times. Suzanne Hahn from 1956 to 1972, actress Patty Duke from 1972 to 1985, and Valerie Ann Sandoval since 1989, and raised sons across those marriages, including his adopted stepson Sean Astin, who went on to star in The Lord of the Rings, and his biological son Mackenzie Astin, also an actor. Astin reprised Gomez for the 1977 reunion special Halloween with the new Addams Family, voiced the character again for the 1992 animated series, and has spent decades teaching acting at Johns Hopkins University, still a fixture of its theater program. Jackie Coogan died in 1984. Carolyn Jones died in 1983. Ted Cassidy died in 1979. Blossom Rock died in 1978. Margaret Hamilton died in 1985. Ken Weatherwax died in 2014. Felix Silla died in 2021. Lisa Loring died in 2023. John Astin, at 96 years old, has outlived every one of them, and is still teaching, still working, still married to the woman he wed 37 years ago. Gomez Addams was the only father on 1960s television who thought his family's strangeness was the whole point. John Astin has spent 62 years being the last man standing from a house built entirely out of jokes about death, and has simply refused, so far, to be the joke's next punchline. They aired their final new episode on April 8, 1966, after 64 episodes across 2 seasons on ABC. Today, 8 of the 9 faces from that opening title card are gone. One in a Culver City cemetery beside a fortune he spent his life protecting for other kids. One in her mother's crypt in Anaheim. One buried in his own backyard. One silent in Glendale after a decade with no voice left. One in a Connecticut retirement home, remembered for a role that wasn't even her most famous one. One in North Hollywood after finally outrunning the name that haunted him. One in Las Vegas, the last costume performer standing behind a face nobody ever saw. And one in Burbank, in her own daughter's arms. John Astin is in Baltimore, 96 years old, teaching students who were not alive when the show first aired. The real Victorian house used for that first episode is still standing today on Chester Place in Los Angeles. Part of a university campus now. Its porte-cochere intact, still recognizable to anyone who watched the show's opening 62 years ago. The studio where they filmed everything else closed years ago. The house did not.